and welcome. My name is Judith Silverman Hodara, and I'm so happy to be with you today from Fortuna Admissions, talking about how to maximize your chances in round two with some insider strategies. Really excited to spend some time today with my good friend and colleague, Michael Malone. Michael joins us from his studio in New Jersey, and we're really excited to have the opportunity to spend some time with you today and share with you our thoughts on how to maximize your chances in round two insider strategies. Wanted to definitely call out our friends at the GMAT Club. Really happy to be collaborating with them on this project. And also, through the duration of today's presentation, please make sure that you reach out to us to schedule an amazing half hour 30-minute consultation, free consultation. We are told that we're some of the best in the business. So if you have some interest and curiosity about applying to round two, we would love to talk with you. And at the end of this presentation, we'll be sharing the website where you can sign up to do that. By the way, I am the one who does a lot of those consultations. I'm a past director of admissions at the Wharton School of Business. Michael has vast experience in careers both at Kellogg and CBS, and we would both love the opportunity to speak with you. So welcome, Michael. Good to see you.
Thanks, Judith. Good to be with you as always, and looking forward to the conversation that we have today with our audience.
Great. So we are going to be talking today about our agenda, which is what schools are looking for, really talking about round two. We know that a lot of you have questions about, is round two really a good time for me to be applying? Should I have applied in round one? We're going to be giving you some on the ground school specific advice, which Michael and I combined have been in this industry for probably over 60 years. Hard to believe, but true. We're going to talk about recommendations and give you some resume and short answer question advice as well. We will also leave time at the end for Q&A. So again, welcome everybody. We see a great group of folks joining. Encourage you to ask us questions. We'll try to answer them in real time if we can. If not, we'll get to them at the end of the presentation. And once again, you do want to sign up for that free consultation at fortunaadmissions.com. So I'm going to sort of just jump in and talk a little bit about what are schools looking for in the round two application deadlines. So certainly, not a surprise to anybody here, they are going to be looking for a very strong academic background, especially in the quant ability. And that's something that's going to be important for you all as you kind of think about how you want to show up for your courses and how you want to show up for the application process, giving the reader a real chance to see that you're going to be able to succeed quantitatively. So that may be in your undergraduate classes, that may show up in your work experience, and that may also be an opportunity for you to really nail it on the GMAT or the GRE. The readers of the applications are also going to be looking for a very solid career progression and accomplishment, and that's going to be demonstrated by your resume, by the things that your recommenders say about you, and also an opportunity for you to really talk about those things within the context of your essays. Certainly being engaged in your community is going to be very, very important for our readers to understand about you, not just about what you might do in your free time, but the things that really matter to you, how you care about whatever community you're a part of, if that's a university community, a work community, the city that you live in, cultural, religious, social, all of these things come into play. Schools are going to want to understand how you relate to others, and this should not come as a surprise for those of you that are working on teams now. Certainly, the schools are going to want to see how it is that you've been able to engage with others, both as a leader and as a member of a team. And so understanding how you bring those together to bear on the people that you work with and interact with. Certainly knowing a lot about the schools that you're applying to, being able to see yourself there, what is the kind of opportunity and experience you're hoping to have over your 2-year or in some case 1-year MBA program. Ability to communicate, talk about who you are, talk about what matters to you, both written and in person or over Zoom in those interview situations as well. And without a doubt, having that clear sense of career goals going to be very, very important. MBA programs across the globe really want to see how it is you're going to be able to take what you've been learning in that 2-year experience and then what happens after that. So, if you've been working in banking, for example, and you imagine yourself working in sustainable energy, how does that happen? Maybe you've been working in a nonprofit and you're trying to figure out, well, how does this skill set allow me to go and run my own foundation, for example? So, really keeping in mind how what you're getting out of that program is going to allow you to move forward in your career. What I'd like to do now is turn it over to Michael, who's going to talk a little bit about some of those myths and challenges. And I think what I might do is actually minimize the screen a little bit so we can see Michael as he talks with us a little bit about these opportunities and challenges.
Great. Thanks, Judith. I appreciate it. So let's talk a bit about round two. We often hear from our folks, clients and prospective clients, that they feel like there is a qualitative difference between applying in round one and applying in round two. And oftentimes the notion is that round one is better. And what I will tell you from my experience is that that is not the case. There are advantages and disadvantages to all of the rounds for application. And so you really have to look at what is going to make the most sense for you. But there is not a quantified or hierarchical way of looking at this. And I would encourage prospective applicants and applicants to focus more on other things. So, what are those other things? Feeling like you are ready and that you have a good, crisp story and a good, crisp reason for applying to business school and a good idea for why you want to apply to particular business schools, that is going to be way more advantageous for you to focus on than which round. So there are folks that are going to be able to get to that point where they feel good about the strength of their applications before or at the round one deadline point. And that's great. But if you're not there, that's okay. It is much more important for the quality of your application and, frankly, for the consideration of the admissions committees for you to focus on the strength and quality and thoroughness of your application. So, by rushing it through round one's not really going to be as much help. Use round two, if you're applying for round two, use the time and the buildup to make sure that each part of your application process is thoroughly thought out, that you have really good, strong, crisp understanding of what you're doing, why you're doing it, and that you could explain it in concise terms to anybody that is willing to listen. That's, I think, a good sign for an application that is ready to go. Now, one other element to think about, because of the timing of round twos, which is typically that sort of early to mid January timeline, something to consider. We have a lot of winter holidays across different backgrounds and cultures. We have a lot of winter holidays during the lead up to those deadlines. So what it means is that for many folks, they're looking to take some time offline, be disconnected, spend time with family and friends and celebrating. But that's also eating into your application and preparation time. So, one recommendation is to think very strategically about how many days, how much time do you have in order to make sure that your applications are in good order, making sure that you devote enough time to each part of the application process so that you are feeling good about the quality. Taking into consideration, and we'll talk a little bit about this later, taking into consideration your recommenders and the fact that they will need lead time during this same busy holiday season to prepare their own portion of your application. So you do have to be strategic. And frankly, this is where working with a coach to get a reasonable timeline for how much time does it take to prepare all of this stuff at the requisite quality for some of the top business schools in the world. But my general recommendation is don't underestimate how much time it can take to put together a quality application.
And that is definitely for sure. We love working with students in December. We don't love working with them on December 29th. So that's definitely something that we encourage you to think about. And your timing is great. If you're thinking about applying to business school and you want to have a conversation with us, we really encourage you to reach out and we'll be honest with you. We're kind of mid-November and we'll help you figure out, can you apply to one school? Have you taken the GMAT or the GRE? So we just really want to be mindful of timing. And we always say it is better to be prepared than rush it, as Michael said, and perhaps you're better off waiting until next year. What I wanted to get into a little bit was some of the different schools that we're going to be looking at and talking about today. So HBS, everyone's one of everyone's favorite schools, really has changed their essays for this year. They used to have a very generalized essay, which was "Tell us about yourself," or "Tell us something we don't know about you." And this year, with a new director of admissions, they've gotten a lot more focused. Admittedly, we don't know how the outcomes are going to be. We can just tell you what we're seeing so far. And they're asking for a lot more specificity in terms of experiences that you've had about your own business background and how you envision taking that forward within the context of a post MBA opportunity. They're certainly looking to hear about leadership. They want to hear a lot about your personal growth. And that's not surprising, and Harvard is particularly, among many, many things, is known for cultivating young leaders. And that's definitely something they're going to want to hear about. That leadership, by the way, doesn't have to take place in your work. It can take place extracurricularly. It can take place informally. I'll tell you that a lot of times when we speak with students, they'll say, well, I don't really have a formal leadership position. I haven't been the chair of my group or the lead on a team. We know that there are so many other ways that you can really impact others and affect change and be a leader from within. So, one of the challenges, I think, if you're here today and you're thinking about Harvard, is to really consider what are some of the other ways that I have shown leadership throughout my academic, personal, and professional lives. And you might be surprised. Again, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're the senior director on a particular team, but that perhaps you're coming to the table, you're getting other people to rally around an idea you have, and you're able to really effectively present that. Curiosity, no surprise there. Harvard is a place where imaginations run wild. And so, curiosity about people around you, places around you, opportunities. There are those that would say that, really these three essays, and I pretty much agree, are digging at the same kinds of questions as who are you? And what do we not know about you? They're just kind of broken up into discrete parts. And for some people, that makes it a little bit easier. You have a little bit of a concrete goal for each of those essays and what it is that you're going to be working on. Without a doubt, Harvard doesn't want to read a lot of extraneous things about you. They really, really want to understand these particular skill sets and these particular experiences that you've had. They do not want to know why you want to go to HBS. So you might hear from a lot of other schools, why MBA, why now, why here? HBS is pretty secure in why you want to go there, right? Everyone has read about them, heard about them, understood their impact on the business world, on the world at large. And so Harvard is not looking for you to name names or name classes or name drop people or alumni. They really want to understand what it is that you are going to be able to get out of the program specifically. And the question is, the word count is tough. There's a question about the challenge for these essays is the word count. How do we make sure we don't sound generic? Well, the goal is to maybe find a story that's really brief and to then give the background. Instead of a paragraph for a run up, you're going to maybe have 2 sentences for a run up. So part of the goal is to get creative in the ways that you share your examples. And, it's always good to have in mind, and I say this a lot, as does Michael, we've both been doing this for a long time. Don't be afraid to put it on paper because you can always take it out. The hardest thing is to figure out what to write in the beginning, but once you get it all out there, then you can kind of pull out the things that seem a little extraneous. So I'm fond of the kitchen sink method, which is if you're thinking it, put it on paper and then figure out if it fits. And again, really, really working on lots of personal growth, ways that you've made a leadership impact or decision. And maybe that was a class that you took in college or university, where you were rallying a group of other people. Or maybe that was in an organization, a soccer team that you've been a part of, or maybe it was in your family. Once again, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're moving multi-million-dollar deals all over the map every day. And I think what Harvard is really looking for is the core of leadership and the core of decision making. So that may not be what, if you sat down with someone and snapped your fingers, the first example might not be a business one. And again, not surprisingly, again, Harvard, and I know this is hard with the word count issue, but they are looking for specific examples. And what we typically suggest our students do is put together some examples that you think in general could be used anywhere in your essays. You have some ideas of leadership, you have some things you're curious about, and then you can start to sort of mold them and hone them down to where they're going to be part of that whole presentation that you're giving to Harvard. Again, Harvard does have a couple of additional smaller essays they're going to be looking for. They do a lot with their interview. We'll be talking about that in another section. So a couple of different ways that you can really share that part of your background with them. I'm going to be tossing this over to Michael to talk about Stanford GSB, which, as we all know, very different approach, very broadly based, and a lot more personal, perhaps, than the Harvard section is.
Let's talk about Stanford. What do we know about Stanford? It is the most competitive business school on the planet. It is small, and their yield is extraordinarily high, meaning the number of folks that are offered admission is very close to the number of folks that are going to start in their class in the beginning of the year. And so, to Judith's point regarding HBS, they are not necessarily looking for extraneous. They take a very different approach than many of the other business schools. Many of the other top schools have a very structured approach. They want to hear very specific things that for them are metrics for indicating your potential for future leadership. Stanford takes a very different approach. They open it up, and it can oftentimes intimidate candidates to have such a broad palette with which to work. With an essay like "What matters to you and why?", oftentimes we hear folks struggle a little bit with where do we start with this? Judith's suggestion, I think, is such a good one in terms of just getting all kinds of ideas down and going through an editing process, a winnowing process, a discernment process to take whatever ideas you have to start with and get down to a point where it is a strong, crisp, believable element. Here's what I would encourage candidates to think about. While it is very open ended, what matters to you and why, it's also an opportunity to be very authentic. And one of the things that I think Stanford really appreciates is to be a little bit off the beaten path. You can be risky and
Mhm, mhm,
unconventional
mhm,
with
mhm.
Stanford in ways that don't necessarily resonate with some of the other top business schools. But what you do have to do is have a really good story. So you have to, in order to write a good story, you start with a sense of reflection. What kinds of things are truly meaningful to you as you think about, childhood all the way through your professional career? What are some of the themes that keep coming up over and over
Mhm,
again?
mhm,
As
mhm.
a career coach, I actually really like this approach because it forces folks to look at what are those themes? What are those threads that stretch throughout? And is there the potential among some of those threads or themes to identify a really good story? There is a why Stanford essay. So they do, unlike what Judith mentioned with HBS, where they're like, don't tell us about HBS. We already know you want to apply here because it's us. Stanford would actually like to hear why Stanford. And you'll hear this in a moment about one of the other schools. What they don't want to hear is, well, it's in Silicon Valley. Um, Proximity to certain industries can be an advantage if it ties to your personal and professional goals. But in and of itself, location is not enough of a statement about why Stanford. So, this is your opportunity to research deeply. It's your opportunity to understand some of the centers, programs, student organizations, initiatives with which you might want to affiliate during your time at Stanford, and to demonstrate that these are things that if you are in the community, if you are part of the community, that you are very willing to dive in. One last tip about Stanford, and again, you could probably extrapolate this to the other top schools, but I think that Stanford has a particularly poignant view on this. And I will paraphrase the way that this has shown up online and in other forums, but they have kind of a no schmuck rule. They are looking for folks who are just good people to be around, good people to interact with, somebody that you would genuinely be excited if they walked into the room and that you know that they are on your team. That's the kind of personality towards which they gravitate. And so think about how you convey that in the different parts of your application, but particularly as it comes through in your essays. So, Judith, let me throw this back to you. I think our next school, top school that we're going to look at is your old stomping grounds, Wharton.
Yes, indeed. And I'm so glad to have the opportunity to speak about Wharton. Um, I am actually standing in my video on the side. You can see I'm standing in one of the newer buildings on campus. And Wharton, certainly very pragmatic in their approach. We're going to talk a little bit about that. So, Wharton wants to understand what your career vision is. What are you going to do with this MBA that you're getting? How have you gotten to this point in your career that you're ready to get an MBA? So, tell us about your background. Tell us about how you've gotten to this point. What does the MBA program bring you? And then how do you ultimately take that to the next step? I'm not suggesting you're going to say, "Oh, I want to be an SVP at such and such a company," but you should understand the industry, and you definitely should understand the role or the function that you would like to be serving. So, kind of some ideas about how you envision yourself taking what you know so far, what you're going to add to that. It's almost like an equation. Um, and then add to that with the MBA. And then on the outcome is, of course, the career that you intend to have after you graduate. Wharton is incredibly community driven, about 830 students in a class, broken into smaller groups. So you're going to have a cohort, you're going to have an opportunity to really engage in a smaller learning team. And so this is very much a community based group of individuals. This is a little bit bigger than some of the other programs. Michael certainly just spoke about GSB, which is teeny tiny in comparison. But I think that Wharton really values the ways that you're engaging with one another. And so talking about specific organizations or research you want to do or ways that you're going to engage in the classroom. And then certainly how you're going to contribute overall once you leave school. So community means a lot of different things. It does not, although it can mean the city of Philadelphia. It can mean the school community. It can mean, the industry at large. It can mean a lot of different opportunities, essentially for you to talk about how it is that you're going to take what you learn and really make an impact when you graduate. And without a doubt, Wharton is not alone in this. They really want you to talk about what you understand about the culture and resources. So you want to dive deep. You want to talk to students that go there, talk with alums that are a few years out, talk with alums that are 5 and 10 years out. It is not helpful to list a group of things that you want to do there just by, I want to do this and this and this and this, but to rather frame it in a way that shows that you really understand it. In speaking with so and so who graduated last year, in my conversation with someone who is my MD, in thinking about what faculty members I might want to talk to, I reached out to Dr. Smith, and this is what she said, right? So being really thoughtful about how you're going to use your essays to tailor what you want to do to Wharton's unique strengths. So each of the essays are going to collectively give you a sense of why it is you want to be there, how you want to take advantage of it, right? Michael knows this, and from being a careers professional, graduating with a position or something that you're starting or ideas about what happens next is really, really important, right? Wharton looks really great, or any school looks great if you have a path when you graduate. So I think each of the schools are going to be approaching this in response to Reese Kennedy, who just asked about reusing essays. Each of the schools is going to use this information in a different way. And that's something that's important. So you'll see, right? Harvard doesn't really care if you talk about how great the school is and what you want to do there. Stanford is kind of middle of the road with their second question. Wharton's pretty upfront. What is it that's going to help you get to where you want to go next? And I think that's important to keep in mind. Um, and Wharton, obviously, like all the other schools, does dive deep into these essays. And I think having read them for many, many years, this is really the first set of information that I would be looking at before I even look at recommendation letters or resume. I am looking at those essays. I was looking at those essays to get a really strong sense of the core of what it is that drives you and what it is that's important to you. We're going to move on to CBS. and Michael's old stomping ground.
Indeed. So CBS tells you a lot about what they are looking for and what their culture is about by not only what questions they ask, but the way that they ask them. The first question that they ask you, they give you 50 characters, not words, not paragraphs. They give you 50 characters. What does that tell you about Columbia? Get to the point. They are very focused. They are after Harvard and Stanford. They field the third most applications of the MBA 7 set. So it means that they are reading a lot. And so they need you to get to the point. Means that winnowing down that discernment process is really important with them. And it means that you have to have a great degree of clarity about what you are planning to do for your career goal, how you're going to spend your summer, which they give you a little bit more latitude. And then they roll right into what are you doing 3 to 5 years down the road? And ultimately, what would your dream job be? So they want a plan. Now, can you deviate from that plan at a point? Of course you can. They have no expectation that you will have everything figured out and that everything is going to fall into place the way that you lay it out in the application. However, when you think about it from the admissions committee standpoint, they're looking at your potential admission as we want to give a spot to somebody who is high potential that can use the resource of a seat in the class and the exposure that you would get as a member of that class to achieving a short term and a long term goal. And they want to know that you have that well thought out and that it's a feasible plan. It's a careers first approach, if you will. So they want to know, well, based on your long term goals and then based on those short term goals, are we positioned as Columbia positioned to aid in that kind of a transition for you? And there are folks for whom this is the perfect fit as a result, and it really, what Columbia offers would help you to get to those goals. And there are folks that this might not be the best fit, but that what they are looking to evaluate and to understand from candidates is, do you have this well thought out? Is it reasonable? Is it feasible? Does this look like it would make sense? And then does the school offer opportunities that would be complementary to what you have stated as your short and your long term plan? A couple of other values that are evident in the way that they ask their questions. One, how will you co-create? What does that tell you? It tells you they're allergic to entitlement, is what it tells you. They are not looking for customers. They're not looking for people who say, okay, you're just going to pour into me and that's it. Co creation, they are looking for natural collaborators, folks that are willing to work with faculty, staff, fellow students, and alumni and employers to co create what would be an optimal MBA experience. So that is something that you want to think about as you approach your not just your essays but the whole of your application is, how have I co-created in the past? How have I co-owned, co-learned, co-created in the past in both academic and professional endeavors, and how can I demonstrate that? They also pride themselves on inclusion. The Phillips Pathway
Mhm.
essay is around finding one or more ways to demonstrate that you know how to build, maintain, and grow an inclusive environment. And they look for specific examples that you can use to demonstrate where you've done so in the past, because for them, that will be a predicate for your potential inclusion in the future. They look for folks who are globally minded. It doesn't mean that you need to have lived internationally. It does not mean that you need to have worked internationally, but they are looking for folks who have a natural inclination towards a curiosity about global and incorporating a global mindset into the classroom. It goes hand in hand with their focus on inclusion. More recently, the dean that they have, he is an electrical engineer by trade, and he has partnered very closely with the engineering school, among other schools at the university. And so you'll see adaptability and innovation as key drivers for the school. It's something that they are increasingly taking pride in and focusing on. Data and AI come up again and again for Columbia. And lastly, they look for a sense of ownership. And we say entrepreneurship, we're talking about ownership more broadly because it may or may not look like starting a business. There are certainly a number of folks that come out of CBS with an entrepreneurship profile in the formal sense, but really they're looking for folks, whether it's owning or starting a business or being an early stage employee or working within a corporate environment or a firm environment and owning processes and solutions. That's, I think, what CBS tends to gravitate towards. They're looking for folks who are willing to roll up their sleeves and to take ownership of problems and create solutions, regardless of what their ultimate short and long term goals are. So, Judith, I think we're back to you, and I think we're going to explore. We're going to start to move towards Chicagoland
Terrific.
and look at Chicago Booth.
We are moving into Chicago Booth. And really, Chicago has a great reputation in the field and has this sort of flagship sense of intellectual curiosity and leadership. They always talk about the number of Nobel Prize winners that they have coming out of Chicago Booth. Although I think, truthfully, I think Columbia is really like very closely matched in that regard. But we're going to talk a little bit about Chicago, and Chicago asks really interesting questions. Both how will Booth help you achieve your career goals, and then who are you outside your office, right? So they're almost like two very different approaches. They want to understand, again, like Wharton does, like what is that path and how do you see yourself moving to what you want to achieve ultimately? How does Booth figure into that? And that may be, talking about the ethos of Booth or things that you want to do there or people that you want to engage with there or the general sense of the program. And then certainly, it is going to give you, they're looking for specifics, but I want to be careful that it's not, again, a laundry list of like this, and this. It's going to be ways that you're going to engage with the campus to help you understand what happens next. And maybe you come in with some things that you really are hoping to achieve and you want to explore, right? That's what this 2-year period is going to be certainly encouraging you to do. And then here's a surprise question. Who are you outside the office? What is it that you enjoy doing? Do you, like playing football on the weekends? Do you like walking dogs? Do you spend time with your family? Are you involved in philanthropy? Do you take classes? Do you like to travel or cook or do yoga or run marathons? Most people that we talk to in our field are not only what they do for a living. Even if they think they don't do anything else, there's always a little bit of something that you enjoy doing at the end of the day, or that you're a news junkie and you love keeping up on what's going on in world politics, or you're a great reader and you love English mysteries, for example. So who are you outside the office, to me, is a fabulous question because you can interpret it in so many different ways. You're a doer, you're a thinker, you're an activist, you're, an outdoors person, or maybe you're a culture hound, right? All these different ways that you can talk about who are you and what is it that personality and all those different pieces that you're then bringing to Chicago. Not surprisingly, Booth is really looking for people that have that analytical capacity, but that are also understanding, how that comes into a data-driven environment, right? So you're not just being an analytical, like this is it and this is the answer, but you're really talking and thinking about the different ways that the data is going to affect your outcome. So I think in a way, Chicago is this really interesting mix of a couple of different ways of thinking. And Booth is not the kind of place where people take things at face value. Things are never because I see it. It's let's think about it and talk about it and twist it and turn it. And so again, you're going to see analysis coming up so often in the ways that they talk about themselves, and they're looking for problem solvers. This is not a shock given what we know about the history of Chicago Booth, right? They really are looking for examples in their essays of the ways that you're talking about, here's a problem, this is how I analyzed it, and here were a couple of the ideas I came up with, right? So strategic thinking doesn't always have a direct answer or direct, like, this is the way to do it, but rather, how am I going to approach it? What are the different things that I'm bringing to the conversation so that my team and I can come up with a couple of different scenarios. I really want to stress that. And I know that this is hard sometimes because, yes, in the M7, a lot of schools are going to start to sound like each other. But I would highlight that Chicago Booth is really looking for that. What about, how about, can I, should I? And I'm going like this because it's almost like each time you turn it, you're going to see a different facet of the opportunity. And that's really interesting because it's a pretty big juxtaposition from the Kellogg program, also based in Chicago.
So let's talk about Kellogg next. For years, Judith, Kellogg was characterized as the marketing school. And they've taken a very intentional path, and you'll see that actually in the way that their essays map out. They've taken a very intentional path towards positioning themselves as being servant leaders and really focusing on a particular brand of leadership. So you'll notice back, if you go back maybe 8 or 10 years, they started this campaign around Think Bravely, and they really wanted to be known as a school that sought out candidates who were unafraid to take the lead, sometimes in sticky situations, to say what needed to be said, to do what needed to be done, but all under the guise of, again, sort of a community-based leadership and a first among equals approach. And what we've seen is the evolution of that Think Bravely campaign now, where they're focusing on a branded becoming a Kellogg leader
Mhm,
and
mhm,
understanding
mhm.
and helping folks to understand what does a Kellogg leader actually entail. It's a strong team player who can and will step into leadership, but will also grow their team and be focused on much bigger picture and strategic rather than in the weeds necessarily and focusing on micro details. And you'll notice that the structure of their essays and what they ask tell a story. The fact that they want to know intentionality, they want a sense for what are you choosing and why, is, I think, an indicator that they're looking at those big picture questions and they want to understand a little bit more of your frame of mind. Another piece that I would say characterizes Kellogg, though, and you'll see this through the types of questions that they ask, is that they are behavioral specialists. Not a huge surprise given their marketing roots, but they turn to human behavior as a predicate for what you are likely to be when you finish the program. And many of the questions that they ask focus specifically on behaviors or experiences that you have had that give them some indication as to who you are and how you would show up as a member of the incoming class. So, an example, they give you a behavioral question, talk about a difficult decision. What did you do? What was the outcome? And what did you learn? How did you impact the organization or the place where that decision took place? They want to know a little bit more about your makeup and what you struggled with and why it was a struggle, but then ultimately what you did and what the impact was. That actually bleeds into the essay questions. Now, this is again a unique element. It has some roots, the video question or the video essay has some roots in wanting folks to really be able to think a bit on the fly. They give you a very short time frame, 96 hours after your submitted application is received, and they want to give you some time to prepare, but they really want this to be, as they would see it, more genuine and unprepared, or at least unscripted is perhaps the better way to describe it. They want to know the genuine you, and so they give you this video essay opportunity. You get a couple of questions, and those questions are very strongly oriented towards behavioral and experiential questions. For example, give us a time where you failed to achieve a goal, and what did you learn as an alternative? Um, Give us an example of a time where you introduced something new to your organization and created value. So they're questions that you may be able to anticipate to a degree, but they've really designed them so that they are catching you at a point where you're kind of thinking off the cuff. Preparing for those, I think working with a coach to come up with some major categories where you could get a question and just developing a good story with your context, your action, and your results, I think will help you to keep on task. It will also help you to feel much more confident in working with Kellogg's video essays. Um, I mentioned earlier that it is a very community oriented, and certainly when I worked there in career management, one of the things that struck me so strongly was that the community really rallies around each other. It is a very inclusive environment. And so they are very protective of that culture and the chemistry that comes along with it. So you'll find that they want to know a lot about how you are as a team member. How do you collaborate? How do you include others, both when you are a team member and as a leader of a team? How do you look out for the folks who are your reports and make sure that they are growing, developing, that they're communicated with, that they understand their expectations? That's really important to Kellogg. They want to know that you are that type of leader. They want to know what your level of empathy is as well, that you can put yourself in other people's shoes and demonstrate an understanding of those folks' mindsets so that when you're leading them, that you are taking them into consideration as well as your own goals and strategies. Last piece to talk about is just your leadership style. It's interesting because a lot of our candidates don't necessarily have what they would describe as formal leadership experience when they come to the MBA application process. Maybe they worked as an analyst for a couple of years and they're applying and they don't necessarily have team leadership. They may have led in college, or they may have had a lead in an internship or in a not for profit. Um, those are potentially really good fertile grounds to start thinking about how you would describe your leadership style when you have led in the past. And some of it can be aspirational, but it really is focused more on what do you bring to the table? Um, what are some of the ways that you would describe your leadership style? And Kellogg will look at that very closely to see, does that seem to align with our sense of first among equals leadership, as Kellogg looks at it. So we have one more top school that we want to explore,
Yeah,
Judith,
we
and I think
we
that's up to the Boston Cambridge area.
we do, and we want to talk about, not surprisingly, MIT, incredibly well known for innovation, for problem solving, quantitative they've got quantitative guts up there, and certainly it's a very short application. They ask for an organizational chart of your workplace. They ask for a video of your you know who you are and a little introduction. They ask for a cover letter and they ask for like a background or essay. So very short and sweet. They do have two interview essays that you're asked to submit before you apply, pre-interview, excuse me. And I'm not going to go through all the details on those particular questions because I know we're running out of time. But I really want to stress that they are looking much like Chicago is: analytical skills and innovative thinking. Examples, examples, examples. So you're really going to want to talk about those times when you considered something and thought about how to make it work and problem solved through it. Talking about how you've been a leader in a problem solving situation in data driven environments. You know, if you're looking at MIT, you might not be applying to schools like Wharton, for example, or you might not be applying to a school like Kellogg, right? Just because it's M7 doesn't mean that all of them are going to be great fits for you. And I think that when you look at the DNA of MIT, it's going to be pretty resonant for you of Chicago, possibly resonant for you of GSB, but not necessarily for all of the programs that we've been talking about today. So one of the tricky pieces of MIT is a little unusual. I certainly recommend that you take a look at what they're asking before you dive in. There's a great way to kind of make everything dovetail together as much as you can. And certainly, you know, again, a little bit of an outlier in terms of how they approach the application, but definitely something that we really like working on a lot within our team because it is so different. Believe it or not, I am pretty close to being out of time, and I apologize. I just got the high sign from our stage runner that we are really, Michael and I had a lot to say today, and we really want to make sure that we have the time to meet you. I will be available for you afterwards in the MBA Fair booth. You can sign up and join us there. Michael, I think, is not going to be available unless I'm mistaken, but I will be there. be really happy to answer all of your questions. You had some great questions today. I know we have some very specific MIT questions. I'm sorry we couldn't get to them. Apart from LinkedIn, how do you get connected with alumni? Ask the people that you've worked with, gone to school with. Just network the heck out of it, and you're going to find that people are really happy to talk to you apart from LinkedIn. I know LinkedIn can be a little cold. Just in a wrap up, we are so happy, Michael and myself, that we were able to be with you today. We've worked at all of the M7 schools. We've worked in admissions and careers and student services. We give the best conversations available in terms of should I even be doing this? Am I right to be applying in round two? We would love to talk with you more about that. Sign up for a free consultation, info at fortunaadmissions.com. I have a very free schedule on Friday. So if you want to sign up, would be delighted to spend some time with you. And if things are right, you'll get a chance to meet Michael as well as a coach. Viewers, visit our booth right after the session. Here's the link. You can see it on the left. I feel like I'm a radio host. Really happy to be partnering with GMAT Club today. Delighted to be with my friend and colleague, Michael Malone. Look forward to seeing you guys at the booth later today. And thanks for joining us. Have a great rest of your afternoon.